All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're just going to give it a minute to let folks get onto our webinar. In case you weren't sure you're in the right place, this is the JFrog webinar on tool consolidation. We're going to get started in just a moment, so sit tight and we'll begin. Okay, we're just about almost 2 minutes after the top of the hour. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Sean Pratt, your friendly product marketer here at JFrog. We're really excited to be talking with you today about tool consolidation. Just a few housekeeping items before we actually jump into the content. We're scheduled for around 30 minutes today, so we're going to really hit you with a lot of information and then get you back onto your day. If you're in the West Coast like I am, you'll be done in time for lunch, so that's awesome. The few housekeeping items, we are going to record this session, so you'll receive the recording typically within 48 hours after we're done here today. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those in at any time. We do have a dedicated Q&A session at the end, but you can put those in at any time and we'll get to them. So with all that, enough of me. I'm going to introduce the star of our show, Shubha Rao, who is a Senior Solutions Engineering Manager here at JFrog. She's been with JFrog for 4 going on 5 years now. And before that, 10 years as a software developer and architect in the IoT space. We're really fortunate to have her presenting and chatting with us today. So without further ado, Shubha, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Sean. Hey, everyone. As Sean mentioned, I'm Shubha Rao. I lead a team of amazing solution engineers for the Americas West at JFrog here. We are basically the solution engineers helping customers with their CI/CD architecture and best practices. So I'm super excited to have this conversation with all of you. Tools consolidation is something that has been coming up quite a lot in the last 3 to 4 quarters. We'll talk about the why, what, and how on it. As Sean mentioned, we have about 30 minutes time, so I'll try to complete the things that I wanted to, the content, in about 20-25 minutes. So we'll have around 5 to 10 minutes at the end for some questions as well. But feel free to put your questions on chat here and we can take it at the end. So let me get started, actually. Give me a minute while I start this. I'll share my screen and it should be good to go. Do you guys see my slide right now? I guess it's visible. So let me get started. So while we're here, tools consolidation is definitely one of the buzzwords that's been discussed in many organizations across different levels, right? There is a lot of uncertainty in the market regarding the recession. There are still layoffs happening, right? And in one of the IDC report that was actually released in December of 2022, 76% of the respondents said that 2023 would be a recession year. So with this, many companies, they started looking at how to optimize their current processes from a budgetary perspective as well, right? If you look at it, when most of the companies around, they use or they have at least or anywhere between 6 to 20 tools for their CI/CD pipeline itself, right? For their SDLC aspect of it. There was another report from Gartner in 2022, which said that 75% of the organizations are pursuing for security vendor consolidation as well. We will look into what are the different aspects that you have to look into, specifically when it comes to security as well in some of the later slides. Security is a big conversation, so we need to give a little bit more emphasis on how to do it and what's the best way to do it. And one of the other things that was also looked at was the IT buyers. Majority of the IT buyers wanted to work with fewer vendors. This is for many reasons, right? They don't want to be, they don't want to be stuck in conversations with multiple vendors, which is basically achieving the same thing, or which is helping achieving the same use case. So let's understand why tools consolidation. But before we do the why, let's go on with the what is tools consolidation. So if you take a step back and look at what is this whole tools consolidation about, it's actually one of the solutions, or rather the solution for one of the biggest issues for the company's IT department today, which is tool sprawl, right? But what is tool sprawl? Tool sprawl, you can look at it in two perspectives. One, there are too many tools to solve one use case, right? For example, I've had companies which are using just for managing their code, right? They're using GitHub, they're using Bitbucket, they have Perforce and SVN as well, right? So multiple tools to solve one use case. There is also another one. There are different tools that are being used for focus solution. So this is about tools fragmentation. But what does this mean? This means, let's take this example. There are companies who are using Docker registry for maintaining the Docker images. They are using NPM registry for managing their NPM packages. Similarly, they have something for Python, something for Maven, something for Terraform. So for each of the different packages, they have different solutions, right? This is what is called as tools fragmentation today. But what is the cost of this tool sprawl? When we think about it, is it just the expense of each of these tools? For sure, but that's not the only thing, right? If you actually look at it, it's your license cost plus the infrastructure cost for maintaining or hosting all these different solutions. The third one is definitely the maintenance cost. Maintenance cost can be, I need to upgrade these tools every so often. Not just upgrade these tools, upgrade my integrations as well. This is where the integration cost comes into picture. And it's not just about, okay, I have this tool, it's up and running. I'm applying the licenses. My license is for an year, so I'm good to go, right? There is, when we talk about the infrastructure cost, let's take JFrog as an example here. When you're managing your self-hosted, you have to look at not just the application layer. For many of the tools, you'll also be looking at your operating system layer. You'll also be looking at your infrastructure. What needs to be upgraded? What are the different technologies that are behind these tools that also need to be upgraded? For example, if it requires a database, you have to look to make sure that the database version is upgraded. If it is hosted on a specific operating system, that operating system needs to be upgraded before you're upgrading the tool as well, right? So you have infrastructure cost, which also includes all these different layers. This also comes into your maintenance cost. The one thing that many of us miss out on is actually the training cost, which is heavy, because every time you bring in a tool, it's not like everybody in the organization are aware of the tool, right? So now you are spending more resources on training these folks to make sure they're using these tools in the most optimal way. And coming to the last point, the integration cost. For example, you bring in Bitbucket, but you also have GitHub. So how do I integrate which team is using which one? How do these different source code management tools are hooking up with the CI tools? How do you integrate them? How do you make sure that your code scanning tools are integrated with both of these source code management tools, right? So there is a lot of integration cost associated with your different tools as well. So from a holistic perspective, when we look at the cost of a tool sprawl, it's license cost plus infrastructure plus maintenance plus training cost and your integration cost as well, right? But why is it important? We talked about how much or what is tools consolidation and how much it costs. There was another report that was published in 2022. It basically said that 90% of the IT buyers want to work with fewer vendors. It's kind of a no-brainer, right? I've been in some of these procurement processes wherein it's not, say, for example, there is one procurement person who needs to make a decision, but it's not his or her own decision, right? They have to talk to legal, they have to talk to the different teams that are using these tools, they have to talk to compliance. They also have to make sure from a security perspective, these tools are compliant and they'll work well with all the other tools that they already have in place. So 90% of the IT buyers are saying, I'm going to be very happy if I can consolidate the number of vendors that I have to work with and work with as less number of vendors as possible. And the second point here is basically 40% say there are too many pricing models. It's like, I've heard this from many folks as well. You know, some tools are user-based, some tools are usage-based, some tools are license-based. Some tools also have a pricing that's based on the specific features that you want, something like an a la carte menu, right? So this makes it very, very difficult for the person who is responsible for procuring these tools, because how do they know whether they have to spend once or they have to budget for spending it multiple times throughout the year? We'll also talk about this in one of the upcoming slides. So 72% of the folks also said that pricing is too complex, right? Because of all these different types of pricing models, how do I plan? How do I make sure I have enough budget for these tools that needs to be procured? Moving on to the next one, consolidation drivers, right? Cost cutting. We talked about how recession is affecting some of these companies. Right? With recession, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, I have to make sure that I'm not spending too much money. So budgetary constraints come in. With budgetary constraints, it's not just about the procurement person thinking about, okay, how much budget do I have for this particular tool? It's also about, think about the tool sprawl cost, right? There is manual, or rather the labor cost that's associated with some of these tools as well. And this labor cost, the folks who are going to be implementing or using this tool, they might not have the necessary information. So you're also spending more time on that information. Initial training, not even training your other people who will be using the tool, but just the folks who will be maintaining. You have to work on making sure they have the knowledge as well. So when we talk about budget, it's not just the tool, it's also the labor cost and the resource cost. And the next point that I hear quite a lot is CapEx versus OpEx. CapEx is my capital expenditure, right? Whereas OpEx is my operational expenditure. So CapEx is, for example, I buy the license and I'm good to go. That's CapEx. But companies do not just think about CapEx, or they shouldn't be thinking only about CapEx, because there is an ongoing maintenance. So there will be operational expenditure. So when they look at cost cutting, they're also looking at, is it a one-time pay? Is it something that I'll have to pay on a monthly basis, or whenever I use this feature, do I have to pay? So this is where budgetary constraints also comes in, because they have to make sure they have a hold on how much is being spent, right? And with all this, we talked about integration and maintenance and how much of a cost it can be. Integration and maintenance is definitely OpEx, because even from an integration perspective, let's take Jenkins, right? It's not like you enable one of the plugins on Jenkins and you can just let it go, right? The Jenkins, the whole reason why it's called a plugin hell is because you have to make sure that those plugins are up to date as well, right? So as small as just making sure that those plugins are updated, and whenever you update, it doesn't matter or it doesn't affect your entire CI/CD pipeline. This is all a part of your operational expenditure. So these are all the things that folks will have to keep in mind when they are buying tools and when they are consolidating tools as well, right? And this is what matters when companies are looking at cost cutting. The second one, security. As I said, security is something that is when we think about security, we always think about it from our perspective, or whatever persona you are in, we just think about it from that perspective. But let's take a step back. Security means that, let's take a CI/CD pipeline, right? So there is a SaaS tool, there is an SCA tool, there is runtime scanning, but I'm just still giving very high level examples, right? Within SaaS tool as well, there is so much, there are so many different features and different tools that are a part of this. But just not this. When you think about these tools, you also have to think about what are the legal and compliance requirements that I have to adhere to, right? For example, more tools is good because there is more coverage of your different aspects. But at the end of the day, more tools also mean that there is more to secure from a security perspective, right? Including your firewalls, including, say, PII and GDPR requirements. So how do I make sure some of these are compliant and there is no data that's getting into these tools, where it should not be getting into these tools. So it's a load on the security team as well to keep track of all these different tools that are in place today. And when you go with pointed security solutions, they always create complexity. This is something that one of my customers also brought in, right? They're like, hey, I'm getting all this information from my SAST tool. I'm also getting this information from X-Ray, which is JFrog's security software composition analytics solution. And I also have a lot of information on my runtime analytics tool. How do I actually merge this information to take the right decisions? This was one of the biggest, or this is one of the biggest headaches for the security team, right? This is one of the reasons why consolidation is being driven from security team as well. Last one here is the efficiency. I want to reduce my complexity in my IT systems, right? There is so much that needs to be done just to maintain these tools, just to make sure that they are compliant, as we just discussed, just to make sure that they're all updated. And I'm looking at automating stuff, but even for automating, I need to put in a lot more resources to automate this. So then my focus, or my priority that I have to choose is, do I focus on building new features, like creating more automation and make sure it is more self-reliant, and work on optimizing the tools that I already have? Or should I just be working on the day-to-day maintenance? So this is where efficiency also matters quite a lot when it comes to how you consolidate, or what you consolidate, and whether you even consolidate or not. Okay. All right. The next one here, it's like there are too many tools, but sometimes what happens, there isn't enough value that you are getting out of these tools. The first one is, you have to create a single source of truth. Because let's just take the example that I gave you earlier, right? Wherein customers have a different registry for their Docker images. They have a different solution for their Terraform. They have a different solution for their NPM packages, and etc. Now, if I need to pull any data from these things, I have to first of all have different automations. And if I want to understand how a particular artifact is being used, I don't have a single source of truth. I'll have to work with all these different tools to understand what data is being used, what version is being used, where, when, and how. So creating a single source of truth is very important. The second one, this is actually very interesting. When you have this consolidated approach and when you have a single source of truth, it actually helps in breaking down silos, which actually aids in collaboration and bringing out better products and optimizing your processes. How is that? I have a customer. This is, again, they are using our platform, JFrog platform. They also have that the main business, the way they work is they acquire a lot of these different smaller companies, right? So every time they acquire companies, they're also acquiring all these different tools associated with these companies. So the IT team is actually going crazy because they have to have support for all these different tools. So when they integrated everything and consolidated it, they were able to break down the silos for better collaboration. And all these leads to save time and cost, right? Now you're working on lesser number of products compared to all these different tools that you have to maintain. So what are the major areas to consider for tools consolidation? One is definitely CI/CD tooling. Okay, there is a pro and con in this, to be very frank with you. I have some customers who are using Jenkins for their CI, but they're also extending Jenkins for their CD aspect of it. So this is where you have to see, okay, Jenkins is good for my CI, but is it actually a good solution for my CD? I wouldn't suggest you to use Jenkins for CD, to be very frank with you. There are many things that Jenkins doesn't support. Rather than that, going with a CD tool would definitely be helpful. So here is where you'll have to look at how do I consolidate this by using maybe maximum 2 types of products rather than having all different ones. The second one is definitely artifact storage. This again, I do want to take another example. This was a new biz customer, the new customer. We were just talking to them, and the first conversation that we had, we got to know all the different places where they're storing their artifacts today. They had their artifacts in an NFS store. They had some in S3 bucket. They had some in some of the open source package managers that are out there. So in the next call, when we had their VP sit in and we were presenting, hey, you guys have all these different tools or different packages in these different tools. You should be looking at consolidating it. The VP was actually surprised because he didn't even know that there were different solutions that were being used. Similarly, for container registries, you don't have to have, if you're on AWS, you're using ECR. If you're on Google, you're using GCR, Azure ACR, right? Instead of that, have one type of container registry that can be hosted on all these different clouds or even in your on-prem. That is what works the best. Software security solutions, we talked about it, right? There are some solutions wherein you do want to have more pointed ones, but try to also uniform or standardize some of these solutions across your different orgs or BUs so that it's easier to manage and maintain. Dynamic runtime deployment technologies, we talked about this. There are multiple deployment technologies in the market today. So that is definitely one of the major things that you'll have to look into. Last but definitely not the least is the monitoring capability. Customers are like, okay, I'm using Splunk for my log, I'm using New Relic, but I have some other teams which are also using, say, Dynatrace, some other customer or some other team did their own POC, and they're very comfortable with my Prometheus and Grafana setup, and it's also free for them. So they're completely okay, and it fits in their budget as well. So they're maintaining it on their own. That doesn't help, right? Now that team is putting resources on maintaining their Prometheus and Grafana. Another team is putting effort in maintaining New Relic. Another team is putting in effort to maintain Splunk. Another team may be having their own Datadog deployment. So there are multiple monitoring capabilities and tools and solutions. You have to think about how do I consolidate it. And this is where, not just for monitoring capability, right? One of the trend that I'm seeing in many of the large organizations is building this, how do I put it? This is like the Center of Excellence team, right? Center of Excellence team is the one that maintains all the different tools and services, and they provide these tools as a service for different orgs or different BUs within the organization. So going through that route and this team managing all the different tools in a centralized way and in a standardized way definitely helps in cutting costs. So tools consolidation from a security perspective. I've just taken 2 customers example here. There was one company which was using multiple tools. They had White Source, they had Aquasec, and they also had an SBOM tool, right? It's again, as I said, they're using multiple tools to achieve the same thing here. There was another company which was using not just Sneak, they were also using Black Duck. They were using Veracode. Sneak and Black Duck kind of have a lot of similar features. Sneak has some extra features as well that they were using, but they were also using Veracode for just their code scanning, right? And they, of course, had a bunch of home-built security tools as well. So when they looked at the cost of these tools, you have White Source, Black Duck, Sneak, all three of them. If you look at the cost, it's one of them has based on usage, one of them has it based on users, and one of them has a CapEx that they have to pay. CapEx is basically what do you pay right away. They have a huge amount that you have to pay for one of these tools. So this is where companies, when we started talking to these companies, they were like, okay, let me take a step back and understand what is my TCO today. And this is where they were like, okay, we have to go ahead and consolidate, right? But security, the problem here is everyone in security, they are risk averse, right? But the thing is, the probability of something happening times the cost of when it happens, this is where risk is. So folks in the security arena are like, you know what, I'm very conservative. I don't know if I actually want to consolidate this. So this is where you'll have to sit down and look to understand how to consolidate stuff, right? Again, we're talking about all these different things, but what is it actually that you're achieving? Some of the things that we don't look at, it's not just cost, right? Cost optimization is of course there, but when you actually consolidate all these different tools, you will also be able to do more analytics-led decision because now you have the data. I think most of you have heard that data is the new oil, right? So what you have to do is understand your strategy, the organizational impact that it would have, understand the data landscape before selecting your drill. So before selecting the tools that you want to use, make sure you go through some of these components, which we'll talk about in the next slide. So for you, first of all, how to go through consolidation, create an inventory, look at all the different tools that are being used by different teams, identify what matters the most, prioritize, look at which are the tools that are legacy, which are the tools that actually map to your future decisions. Look at which are the focus areas for your consolidation. Maybe security is not the first step you want to take it. You take a look at. Maybe monitoring tools is your first look, right? Bring it all together. Have a team which looks at things from a holistic perspective and see how it matters or impacts your organization. And then plan on migrating these tools one after the other. Okay. The last one that I do want to talk about is how do you consolidate with JFrog? If you look at JFrog, many of our customers or many people in the market as well know us by Artifactory. Artifactory is a main component. This is where you store your packages, you store your binaries. Once you store your binaries, this is where the entire journey kicks off when you think about the end stage, which is your deployment, right? What you deploy is actually your binaries. So what do you want to know? Let's start working back on that from there. So you have your binaries, not just the Docker images, not just your container images. You'll also be storing your NPM packages, your NuGet, your Python, your Scala, Ruby, all these different packages. Today, Artifactory supports around 32 plus package types. But not just that, you will also be able to store your Terraform packages, your Ansible playbooks, your Chef, all these things, you can actually store it in Artifactory. We also provide a lot of integrations with many CI/CD solutions. We also, when you look at some of the supply chain security aspect of it, we have X-ray. But when we look at X-ray, X-ray is just one component of our whole security solution, right? We have on-demand scanning. We introduced something called JFrog Advanced Scan, which includes contextual analysis, which is very important because I'll give you one example. There was a customer when all this Log4j started happening, right? They were like, hey, I'm storing a lot of these artifacts in Artifactory, and I'm also using it to pull data for the deployment purposes. Now, I don't know which version of Log4j is actually present in my binaries. How do I look at it? So this is where we were able to help out, because what X-ray does and what Artifactory does is you will actually get an SBOM of all your artifacts and what does that package contain, right? By using Artifactory and X-ray, they were able to figure out, okay, which particular version of this log4j is present. With the contextual analysis, you'll also be able to identify whether it's applicable to your, if the vulnerability is applicable to you or not. So this is where we are helping with the software supply chain. We also support distribution and caching with our distribution tool or product and edge nodes. We also have products such as PDN, that's Private Distribution Network. And this is where the IoT and the edge management also comes in with our support for OTA using our Connect product. Okay, so this is something definitely you can think of when you're consolidating with JFrog. With this, I want to kind of wrap up this webinar. I think I took a little more than what I meant to take. So Sean, do we have any questions?
Hey, Shubha. Yeah, thanks so much for taking us through that, and a little bit over, but that's okay. We still have time. We did have a couple of questions that came in, and I want to remind folks that if you do have any questions, now is your chance to get those answered. Of course, first question, can you share the slides? Will there be a recording? Yes, both of those will be available for you. You'll get them typically in a couple of business days. So today's Thursday, maybe Monday. We'll see how hard we're going to work on a Friday, you know. The next question, Shubha, that we have for you is, are you seeing a shift to SaaS as a part of tool consolidation to address some of the like infrastructure maintenance and other cost elements?
Exactly. So that's a very good question. Many of the companies, this is one of the very common discussions that we are having with our customers as well. Many of them are like, we don't want to be maintaining these tools in our own self-hosted environment. We definitely want to move it to cloud. Either cloud, self-hosted, or if this tool has, if the company provides a SaaS option, this is where many of our customers are moving to our SaaS option as well. We have one of the biggest chip manufacturers on our SaaS. We have some really huge, big enterprise customers moving to SaaS as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Another question is, when looking at consolidating, I'm not really finding one tool that's going to solve 100% of my pain points. How do you recommend prioritizing which tool to select when none of the options 100% fit my needs?
Couple of things in this. One, that's of course true, right? There is no one tool that kind of fits everything, that solves all your pain points. So this is where you have to take a step back and prioritize what you're going to do first. But during your prioritization process, look for a tool that solves at least 75% of the pain points that you have. For the rest 25%, what I would suggest is try to understand what the company has been doing over the years. For example, look at how they have added features, how they have evolutionized, or how they have added more capability in the previous years, and definitely try to understand what these tools or these companies' roadmap is before you make the decision. Because something that might not be available right now might be available in the next quarter or even end of quarter. So even when you buy a tool, it's not like you'll be able to use 100% of it on day one, right? There will be a path for you to go ahead. So similarly, try to understand what the product roadmap for these companies are before you go ahead and say, yes, this is the tool for me.
Awesome. I think that's something really important for people to keep in mind is you're not just buying something today, you have to think about what it's going to be in the future.
Exactly.
Okay. So another question that's come in is, you mentioned obviously layoffs and people are feeling kind of crunched. So even spending time on consolidation is a big resource pull. How should we manage it?
So that's definitely one of the biggest thing. So this is where, again, I'll go back to kind of prioritizing it and taking step by step. Some of the companies that I'm seeing in with talking to multiple customers is within a CI/CD process, you have your code versioning system, you have your artifact management system. So they are slowly conquering one thing after the other, right? But this is where you also have, when you're looking at what needs to be taken up first, you also have to look at the resources that you currently have. What is their expertise? If you have resources who are really good at managing code versioning systems, so maybe take it up first while you build while you train your resources on the other aspects of your CI/CD solution as well. So it has to be a step-by-step process.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. Final question for you is, how can you go about consolidating tools without breaking all of the pipelines, all of the automations that we've already set up?
So we have zero downtime upgrades, but zero downtime integrations or consolidation is something that is difficult to achieve. So I'm going to be 100%, I'm going to be completely honest with you here. There will be some downtime or some issues that you will face when you are integrating or when you're consolidating the tools. As I said, no tool fits 100% of your use cases. So here is where, again, you'll have to go talk to your development teams to see how they're using it, what are they using, and look at what their timelines are. For example, many companies have, they shut down any upgrades or any deployment work during Christmas time, because for them, 100% up and availability of their websites is super important. So no upgrades at that time. So all these things are the ones that you have to keep in mind before you move forward.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, probably very difficult. You're not going to get away with, having to rebuild perhaps a few things, but if the payoff in the end makes your life better, you kind of have to suffer a little bit of pain to achieve some relief later on.
Definitely. Part of growing pains in a way. So
yeah. So, okay, we're a bit over time. I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up there. Shubha, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to put together this content and present it to us. Folks, if you have any other questions that you'd like answered, you can always reach out to us at JFrog. We're always here to help. Shubha and her team of solution engineers, they're there to make your life better and easier. So if you ever have any questions or would like to schedule a session with them, just reach out to us. So Shubha, thank you again. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.